All right. Well, according to the world of both Apple and Microsoft, it's gone 4 o'clock. So we'd like to start right on time. Welcome everyone to our first curriculum conversation, which is being held by the Australian Museums and Galleries Association, Education Network National. Before I introduce myself and the committee, I would just like to start by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land and pay my respect to elders both past and present. I can see that a number of you have already put the traditional owners of the land on which you're located into the chat. If you would like to add your traditional owners into the chat, you're more than welcome so that we can acknowledge all the different lands that we are on today. My name is Brianne Fallon. I am from the Melbourne Holocaust Museum, and I put my hand up at the last AMaGA conference to be president of AMaGA Education National, which we're trying to reinvigorate this year. And part of what we wanted to do was to have one PD session each term, and welcome to that first one. I'd like to introduce you to the other members of the committee before I hand over to our moderator for today. So we have our co-secretaries, Hermione Higgins, who's going to give us a wave.
Hello.
And we have we have Sarah Vanderwow, who's also going to give us a wave.
Hello.
And then we have our treasurer, Erin Jameson, who's going to give us a wave as well.
Hi.
So it's lovely to see so many of you on here today. Hermione is the one who brought our facilitators together and is going to moderate our conversation today. So over to you, Hermione.
Thanks, Brianne. It's a short time to pack in 3 speakers, but I think with the sort of split away from a national curriculum that has happened since it was introduced, that it was important to get voices from multiple states and try and hear about how different groups or different institutions are managing these curriculum conversations internally and also with each other. So I'm not going to spend a long time on introductions because we don't have a long time, but I'll just pass straight over to our first speaker. So each speaker is going to talk for about 10 minutes about something that they're working on currently, and then we'll have some time for questions at the end. If you have any questions for speakers along the way as we go, there is a Q&A button should be on the top if you're on a desktop, or just pop your questions in there and Sarah will monitor the chat so we can have some questions at the end depending on our time. So I'm going to pass over to Narelle first. Dr. Narelle Wood is the Senior Education Advisor at Parliament of Victoria. So straight over to you, Narelle.
Thank you. I'll just share my screen. Thank you very much for inviting me to speak today, and I would like to begin by acknowledging the lands from which I'm presenting today, which is the Bunurong country, and also acknowledge that Parliament House is on Wurundjeri country. What I thought I would do is talk you through a little bit about our approach to education at Parliament of Victoria and some of the key resources that we are both working on and things that we've just recently published. So one of the key things that we looked at when I started about 5 years ago was we were looking at reinventing our education strategy. Our resources at the time were quite good, but they were quite old. They'd been there for about 10 years, and we wanted to look at what else or what new things we could bring to education, especially in light of the fact that we were getting a new website. If you've ever been to Parliament of Victoria's old website, it is an historical artefact from something from the 90s. So we wanted to move forward to this century. We had a long discussion about, first of all, what the education role was in community engagement and across Parliament of Victoria. The schools program, the student-facing program, is run by a different department, our tours and customer service team. So they do all the school experiences in terms of tours of the house, the the metro visits and regional outreach. So we were trying to find out, well, where then do we fit? So we decided to prioritise focusing on teachers and supporting building teachers' capacity in teaching civics and citizenship, given that we know that there are a lot of teachers who are either teaching out of field or don't report having high levels of confidence. We also wanted to focus on how do we connect Parliament to everyday students' everyday lives, also recognising that students' everyday lives are across the whole state of Victoria, and that's incredibly diverse. So we know from one of the programs that we run, Parliament Prize, that we have a lot of students who are politically minded, but perhaps don't know how to engage or don't know what to do with that, with their passions around different issues and things like that. And because we are writing for every school across the state of Victoria, which is just under 2,500 schools, we wanted to make sure that we were making resources and programs that were flexible and adaptable, regardless of the context in which they found themselves being used in. We also know that we love our federal colleagues, but most teachers across the state will go to federal parliament before they'll come to their state parliament. So we wanted to build programs and resources that were specifically state-based and talked about what it meant to be Victorian or the Victorian processes, and make sure that we consider our metro and regional contexts, especially given that Parliament House is very visibly metro-centric as well. Then the last consideration was, there is a lot of information about civics and citizenship out there, but what's Parliament Victoria's add-in? And one of the things that we identified is that we have access to the clerks, the committee managers, parliamentary librarians, so stuff that teachers wouldn't be able to, or students wouldn't be able to readily find themselves. Not everybody has the privilege of being stuck on a question and being able to write to one of the clerks and go, hey, what does this terminology mean? And can you let me know how does this fit into the big scope of parliamentary processes? So with that in mind, we looked to things like our 3 levels of government flashcards. And one of the reasons I wanted to talk to these is we've just had these hot off the press printed. So teachers can still download them for free, but we will have them available to purchase on really nice cardstock that's reusable, and a really nice design. I'm very proud of the what we've produced in this resource, mostly because it's something to play with and tangible, and I love hands-on activities. So this we've used across primary, secondary, tertiary levels, and also with staff at Parliament and teachers as well. And it is an activity that never fails to get really good quality conversation going. And one of the things we love about it is it also enables people to be able to delve into more complexity. So one of the questions that I really love is, if you needed to add a level of government, what would that be? And we had some students, some young people from a council say they'd like to add a 4th level of government based on demographics rather than geography. And it was really, really interesting. And then they started talking about, oh, what does that look like? Who chooses? Who's responsible? Getting into all those really meaty questions around intersectionality and things like that as well. So it's on the surface a really simple resource, but one that actually has quite a lot of flexibility and complexity. We divide our resources up into teacher guides, and the teacher guides have content that delves a little bit deeper than what you might find, let's say, in a textbook, and then activities to support that. So teachers can choose their entry point for both themselves and their students, and try and put together things that might take teachers a really, really long time. So at the bottom in the middle there's our electorate data cards, which we've just printed, and we have, or published I should say, we went through the Australian Bureau of Statistics data for every electorate, that the library had produced a very comprehensive Excel spreadsheet, and put together cards that we think that teachers then might be able to use in their classroom to talk about, well, what does representation mean? If this is the body of people that you're representing as an elected representative, what sort of things might they be concerned about? I think I will stop there. One of the things that we're really keen on doing is finding ways to make civics come alive in the classroom. So the project that we're working on currently with Swinburne University and their School of Design and Architecture is a new scenario-based learning experience that builds on a lot of our resources, that looks at what Victoria might look like in 2050. So really trying to find some of those ways in looking at teaching resources and teacher professional development that fills a gap that the textbooks, teaching associations and other parliaments may not have either the resources to do or have access to the expert knowledge base that we do, that we can fulfil. I think that gets me just under the 10 minutes.
Yeah, thanks so much, Narelle. I think the teacher focus is not something like we tend to get a lot of pressure in terms of getting students through the doors, and so it's really interesting to hear how you're engaging the teachers to reach those students, and perhaps we can focus on that in question time and look a little bit about how you measure that engagement. So handing it over to Janson over there, Director of Communications, Engagement and Education at Parliament of New South Wales.
All right. Hi, everyone. I'm just going to get this going. Okay. Can you guys see that? Amazing. Okay. So I've got a few slides here, and I'd like to recognise that Dan in the team is one of our civics and citizenship guns and has been instrumental in a lot of the work that we're doing at Parliament. So shout out to Dan there on the call. So today, here to talk to you about CCs, in particular, curriculum conversations. And I just noticed that civics and citizenship is also a CC and cross-curriculum is a CC. So that's interesting. It's also my guilty pleasure. This is Parliament of New South Wales. For those who don't know Macquarie Street or haven't been there, this is what it looks like. But behind that is 60,000 years of First Nations culture and practice. So I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we're gathered and pay respect to elders past and present. This is an amazing acknowledgement of country sculpture that we delivered in August of last year with an Aboriginal artist called Alison Page that looks at a core sample as if you'd imagine what was underneath New South Wales Parliament 60,000 years ago. So this is the team. This is who leads up education, Aboriginal engagement and media. Jeannie's team, of which Dan's part of, does all of our work. But interestingly, we have a designer within the team that's really instrumental in helping produce the resources, plus Stacey's team in promotion and Aboriginal engagement. And I think that cross-curricular approach is very much something that we adopt at Parliament, and are thankful to have resources in the team to do that. So a quick bit of background on me, given this is AMaGA. My background's product design, industrial design in particular. I was a secondary teacher, again, design and technology, so sort of arrived at civics and citizenship in a sort of roundabout way, but worked in museums for most of my life earlier. So Powerhouse Museum and Museums and Galleries New South Wales, AMaGA is something that I'm very, very familiar with. So this is a bit of work at Powerhouse Museum, mostly in the learning and public programming space, and then later exhibitions. V&A overseas, running the schools program, Museums of History New South Wales most recently, and looking at public programming across both, across a number of sites, installations, and latest is learning programs. I think some real common elements with our approach to civics engagement is looking at place-based learning and object-based learning. So that's really critical. So a bit of a snapshot of things, current assessment, and people would have seen this report. I thought this might be timely to share with the group, particularly if you don't necessarily work in this space. So the ACARA report that looks at only 28% of Year 10 students and 43% of Year 6 students are proficient in civics. So that's the kind of current, the environment that we're in. It's the worst record in results since ACARA first began testing in 2004, so 20 years ago. What that means is, fundamental participation in civics and democracy overall and society. So I think that's really an important backdrop to kind of note. And there's the report if anyone wants to find that further. So then what does that mean for parliaments? And I think what we see on this call in this meeting is that education is a core function of the work that we do at Parliament, and understanding how decisions are made underpins much of what we do in terms of encouraging civic engagement and participation. So fostering greater civics literacy is like a core purpose of what we do, which we do across both our learning programs and public programming. In terms of how we sort of approach the curriculum, we have, I sort of mentioned the chamber tours. Our Parliament sort of divides that between the houses, and we inform the curriculum development, the scripting of those particular programs and tours. But that's a real hook for students, and looking at the primacy of the building, understanding how bills are produced and passed, Australia's oldest parliament, the primacy of the building is really key, and character-based learning, sort of action-based learning is a key part of that component in terms of civics engagement, role-playing, etc. But definitely in terms of understanding that we are not our audience advocacy is a key underpinning to the work that we do at New South Wales Parliament, and also ensuring relevance. So the work that I see the team do day in, day out is applying the learning that they're doing in the classroom to real world settings. And I think that's a real powerful approach in terms of helping younger people better understand what it means to have a democratic society. And this one here, I think, is really key. So this is like a sound wave. It's if anyone who's familiar with using Shazam doesn't actually listen to music; it listens to the gaps in the music. And this is very much an approach that I really like, because it's about finding the gaps in the knowledge. And someone, I think it was Narelle earlier on, mentioned that which parts of an organisation does particularly well, and where can we fill in those gaps? And I think that's a useful kind of metaphor for us to adopt. This was a deck that the team presented at Natalie's wonderful Parliament in Adelaide recently. And this gives a great sort of snapshot, a sort of Venn diagram of the continuity between our schools programming and our community programming. There's a great crossover and intersection with that. And you can kind of see here with this chart is that our schools newsletter is one obvious way that we engage schools, but also our family day and community days and other key ones. Member engagement is really critical to driving visitation across New South Wales, and it's obviously very wide and distributed. But public programming in particular is a great vehicle for civics engagement, because it has that intergenerational learning. On any given day, you might have a grandparent, a parent, and a student or a young person. And providing that connective tissue with our public programming is really key. And often you think about the formal schools channels, and it's often those people will come to a family day, and we've got one coming up on Tuesday, the 15th of April, the Festival of Democracy. People get along with their parents, young ones get along with their parents, and then they go back to their schools and they let the schools know, hey, there's this great place called Parliament of New South Wales that they've been exposed to through that program. This is a bit of a snapshot around how we work with our colleagues across Parliament. So obviously we're part of the Department of Parliamentary Services, so Communications, Engagement and Education. We work alongside the Legislative Assembly and Council to do various forms of program delivery, community days, and then specific programs focused on sitting days. We also look at travel subsidy to try and encourage schools from the regions. For this one, this is a new initiative that we're doing this year, because we recognise the biggest barrier to entry for schools is the cost of an excursion. People would be familiar with that in this forum. So we're offering up schools the subsidised amount of $300 to bring their students if they're 120 kilometres from Parliament proper. So watch this space. We've had some really good uptake from that so far, which is great, and looking to pilot that and reflect on it. And then we do a lot around the legal studies space, so which I'll go to detail in a bit more. This is a snapshot of our learning program. So when you combine what we do in CEE, so the formal education team plus the chamber tours, we get around 30,000 students per year. and teachers participating in our programs. What that also looks like is 33 public programs, and the education website is another key resource where we engage schools. I'll just jump to the next slide. It's frozen. Okay, public programs. So I mentioned that this is a great example of some of the programming that we do in this space. And I mentioned for April, we've got the Festival of Democracy. What I just wanted to bring to people's attention with these programs is the number of new visitors to Parliament. So in October last year, we ran the Family Fun Day. 75% of audiences had never been to Parliament before. So we know that that's a great springboard for getting families and young people in. Top activities were the chamber tours and craft activities. And then we've sort of got Aboriginal engagement, which relates to some of what we're talking about today, but I won't spend too much time on that, as well as media and comms. So here's what we do in a nutshell, more or less, and then a couple of visuals on what that looks like across our offer. So video conferencing, student Parley Flicks, which is an adaptation of our colleagues down in Victoria who do great work in this space. So each year it's a different thematic and students respond to that one. This year the theme is Why Democracy Matters. And then we've got House Talks and Parliament Unpacked. We've actually got one tonight, our first of the year, which is Claire Wright from Victoria, who's talking around women's suffrage related to International Women's Day. And then to jump to these ones really capture the idea of student leadership. So getting young people at that point where they're really starting to grapple with some of these topics and putting them in, real world situations and debating topics that matter in the context of Parliament. And legal studies in the legislature is another key one that we deliver for remote audiences plus on site. So cross-curricular, it's a good question that was posed by Hermione in terms of civics is not taught as a standalone subject in New South Wales. So the sets of syllabus to be implemented from 2027 continues this current model that we're in, whereby civics and citizenships taught across a number of HISI subjects. So in particular, legal studies, history and commerce. Commerce and legal studies is probably the area that we most program against. And then you've got that cross-curricular priority that's identified by NESA, which is civics and citizenship. And there's a definition of that according to NESA. In terms of the work that we do at Parliament, we'll continue to develop programs and resources for students and teachers in this way. So legal studies, history and commerce. We're looking at producing an Aboriginal studies resource and program very shortly that looks at civics and citizenships in the context of those subject areas. So that's the kind of approach that we take. One game changer, which people would be familiar with, is the mandatory Australia Making a Nation topic. So previously it's been an option, and we know from the classroom setting that it's often a forgotten subject. So the core study, mandatory in years 9 and 10, introduces civics with the role of parliamentary democracy, features the constitution, divisions of power and separations of power. So we've kind of hit the curriculum jackpot in some ways in having that sort of primacy of position within the curriculum. And what that looks like on paper, at least, is that every student in year 10 in New South Wales must study this history topic, which equates to around 70,000 students. So that sounds great, but there's still a lot of work to be done between now and 2027 to get ready for that. And Parliament's a complex place. We have many programs in place which are historical, and part of that work is about adapting that material so it's relevant for students around this depth study, this mandatory subjects, and then the teacher professional development that will come with that. So a little bit more about that. These are some of the areas, so factors that contributed to the development of democracy in Australia. We're very well positioned around that. I think thinking about that cross-curriculum approach, our colleagues at the War Memorial, we're looking at trialling pilot programs because that tells a very great counterpoint to some of these topics and then provides a great value for money experience for, not value for money, but bang for curriculum buck, if you like, because they're both free, on how we might support learning that's that spans those subject areas. And in particular, because we're talking about that particular stage, we're going to get whole year cohort, so 120 students. How do you do a program that caters for 120 students? So concurrent sessions. It's probably a 15-minute walk between the War Memorial and New South Wales Parliament. But these are some of the things that we're thinking around. How can we activate those two sites and get that scale of learning and make it deep and meaningful at the same time? I guess to fast forward into the later part of the discussion, there's various views on whether civics should be taught as a standalone subject or across the curriculum. There's a Commonwealth Parliamentary Inquiry that people would be familiar with. New South Wales Parliament Education Engagement Team gave testimonies as part of that and expressed their professional perspectives on that matter. And that brings us to the end of my section.
Thank you. I think, given it's such a different scope than the other civics curriculums, and I think it's really interesting because on the New South Wales curriculum website, it says that geography and history is where you'll mostly find the civics and citizenship, but then you're obviously finding, no, it's actually in commerce and legal studies, and when in practice they go, it's a cross-curricular priority, and that difference of understanding between when the curriculum is written and when it's actually put out. So interesting points there. So straight over to Natalie, Community Education and Engagement Manager at Parliament of South Australia. Let's head to Adelaide.
Hello. It's nice to see some familiar names in the guest list today, and for those of you I'm meeting for the first time, it's nice to see you. I manage the education engagement programs at the Parliament of South Australia on Ghana land. So this is the beautiful building where I'm sitting today, and just so you've got some familiarity with the space as I talk about it today, these are the two chambers of our Parliament in South Australia, which are incredibly beautiful, and I feel so lucky that I get to work in this space. I've taken a bit of a different approach to Janson and Narelle today, and they've spoken, I think, about some of their programming. And when I got the invitation to talk today, I took it as really technical, like how do I do curriculum implementation here? So I've gone down a bit of a technical road, and to do so, I'm going to give you a little bit of context for South Australia, what our unit does and what the curriculum looks like here. So our office in South Australia and the team that I manage is responsible for 8 broad work areas, which are really quite broad. It's not just the school programs, it's also other learners, general public, supporting members of Parliament. We do all of the Parliament social media. So we're quite a small but mighty team, I would say. And so for today's session, we're probably focusing on the top 2 the most when I talk about curriculum implementation, because we've got the programs that we do for other types of learners like public servants or TAFE students or tertiary students. But in terms of curriculum implementation, we'll look at the first 2. But similar to what Narelle was saying before, my number 1 priority area on this list is actually item 3, which is teacher professional learning. I spend so much time focused on teacher training because I take the view that for every teacher I have empowered in this subject area with parliamentary information, they're going to pass it on to a minimum of 30 students each year. So I'll focus on these 2 today, but if you've got any questions about professional learning, I'm happy to talk about them. So in the first area where we've got services for visiting schools, this encompasses things like the general tour program, so physically coming to Parliament House for your visit and doing a debate. But we also do Civics in the City, which is our travel and funded travel rebates. So we try and support between 25 to 40 schools each year to come to Parliament House, and they have to be outside of public transport access to the Adelaide metropolitan area. It includes our special events, so Teen Parliament, Constitutional Convention, and within the visiting schools, we actually have our members of Parliament as tour hosts. So in the suite of services we offer for schools that visit, we curriculum align all of the content that the facilitators and that the members of Parliament have to deliver. And in here, I've got some pictures, so just so you can see coming to life, our Constitutional Convention and some of the students debating at Parliament House. And if I go back here, the second area So if the first one's what we're physically doing on site, the second area is what we're putting out into schools. So how we're getting out into the community. And so that could include things like lesson plans and resources. So we get ourselves into school by having these materials available, but also through our regional outreach. So we travel 4 times a year to different locations across South Australia, and we set up for a week, and we've got these enormous floor mats of the chambers, which we roll out in town halls or in classrooms. We bring props and equipment and backdrops to try and make it as authentic as possible for the students. So those are the different areas where we need to make sure that we're curriculum aligned. So let's have a quick look at the curriculum context in South Australia. So until 2024, South Australia had direct application of the Australian curriculum, and we went from 8.4 to version 9, and we had made all of these materials around it. And then last year, the Department for Education announced that it would be South Australianising the Australian curriculum. So we're getting our own SA curriculum. That will take us to year 10, and then for year 11 and 12, we've got SACE, the South Australian Certificate of Education. So the new SA curriculum is really interesting because it's co-designed, and it's been co-designed with academics and teachers and students. It's taken on lots of different iterations and feedback, and it's constantly changing. So the idea is that there'll be full adoption in 2027, but over the next 2 years, all of the other subject areas are slowly starting to come into play. So we had all of these whiz-bang materials that were made, designed for version 9, and now we're looking at them in the context of the new SA curriculum, which is interestingly done, and I'd love to hear what other jurisdictions experience, but they've categorised it into what we need to understand, what students need to do, and what students will be. So in the understand, that's your knowledge, and they've based that on version 9 of the Australian curriculum. Under do, that's your capabilities, so your critical thinking or ethical understanding, and that's largely from version 9. And then new for us is the be, or what students will be, and that's dispositions. And interestingly, they've included things like being politically conscious, socially conscious, open-minded, discerning, curious, empathetic. So there's been lots of dialogue here about how that works in practice, and, you know, teachers going, how do we assess empathy? So it's a really interesting space to be looking at right now. So that's the curriculum context. So let's have a look at what we do and how we make sure that that curriculum is brought to life and implemented in our programs that I've mentioned in our materials. So the first thing that we do is offer run sheets and guides for everyone who's delivering a tour that is aligned with the Australian curriculum or SACE, and soon it will also include where dispositions might become evident. So every document has all of the links, and they're scaled by year level. So if you are doing a program for year 4s, you need to take this. This has your year 4 content. If you need to extend it, this is what you need to do. If you need to support students, then this is what you need to do. So every guide and every run sheet is marked, and at the bottom we have a little curriculum matrix to show where all of the links are. The other thing that we do is make sure that all of our online resources that are available to teachers are sorted by Australian curriculum links. The better way for me to show you this is to maybe bring up our website here. And if you go into our teach section and into resources, everything that you would be looking for on here is linked. So we've got clear Australian curriculum markers and SACE markers, and we're looking to build in the SA curriculum for 2026. So it's been very helpful to signpost for teachers what it is that they're looking for. So if I want something for, you know, year 6, once I tick the button, it will start filtering it for you and then showing you when you go into one of the resources, the exact curriculum connections that you would be looking for. So we've spent a lot of time developing this to make sure that the curriculum is very clearly signposted. The other thing that we do is comprehensive curriculum alignment on our resource cover sheets. So every single document that we create and put online has this matrix on it, which clearly shows all of the knowledge, understanding and inquiry and skills from the Australian curriculum. So if I jump back onto the resource that I brought up, if I open up the lesson materials, here you've got, you know, your general lesson plan that a teacher might like to use, but then as you navigate towards the end of the document, it's got linked connections to all elements of the Australian curriculum and SACE. So that way it's clearly signposted for teachers. And the other thing that we do internally and to guide our resource creation is we've actually pulled the entire Australian curriculum out with all of the descriptors for civics and citizenship. We sit down in our office and we go, okay, have we got something that targets this? Have we got a resource for this? So you can see here, for year 3, HAS, generating a list of local, state and territory symbols and emblems, resource created, and we've gone, yes, like we've made something in that space. But then the other elements here of the Australian curriculum, we haven't done a huge amount for year 3 because Parliament tends to come in from around year 5, but we sit down and we use this tracker to make sure that we've got something for every teacher that would be looking for a civics related resource connected to the Parliament. And I'm just mindful of time, so I think I'm nearly at the end. The final thing that we do for our regional outreach and curriculum alignment is make sure that every regional program delivery is customised based on teacher requests. So we have a good dialogue with the teachers that we're going to work with when we do things like regional outreach, and we ask, you know, what are the needs of your learners? Can you tell us a little bit about how familiar they are with civics and citizenship? Or this is what the curriculum says for year 5. Are we here, or do we need to go backwards a little bit? And some pictures on the screen that you can see here is from when we visited the Unanoo Pitjantjatjara Yankunytjatjara lands, which are remote communities in the far north of our state. And we did a lot of prep with the schools to make sure that the content was localised and specific and meaningful for them. So if we were to go and, you know, do a debate on whether AI should be used in schools, that's not going to be as meaningful to these students as having a debate on whether every school in SA should have a swimming pool, because that's more significant, or a conversation that they're having in their communities. So we always try and contextualise things where possible for the learners. This is a link to our website for the Parliament of South Australia's education space. So if you want to have a look at any of those documents that I've just had on the screen, you would be able to find them there. And I think I very closely hit that 10-minute marker. So I will stop there in the hope that we can tackle as many questions as you send through.
Fantastic. It's great to hear about the different approaches, focuses on different target groups and the way that you go about that. And also just interesting about the different team structures that you've been talking about and how you manage that. We might pop over, and Sarah has some questions from the Q&A that have popped up while you've been talking, and we'll start with those.
Yeah, we'll start with the questions in the Q&A, but most of you should be able to see that there's a raise hand button up the top as well. So if you'd like to ask a question rather than typing it in now that we're into our Q&A section, just pop your hand up and I'll get to you. So what I'm going to do, I'll actually go back to the very first question, and I think that this is probably something that most people can probably get into the Q&A depending on where you are and comment on yourselves. Someone's asked us, Canberra has seen a downturn in school excursion numbers that coincides with the decrease in measured civics knowledge, which is really interesting. Have states had a similar downturn in excursion numbers? So we might head to our speakers and see whether or not that rings true perhaps for you, Janson, being in New South Wales, or whether Natalie and Narelle have any comments on that as well.
It's a really good question. We've actually had an uplift in numbers, and it's a difficult science to measure around why the reasons are in particular. The biggest challenge we have is schools, students, and even teachers not understanding the difference between New South Wales State Parliament and Canberra. So often, they don't necessarily get the difference. And I mean, even my daughter's school is guilty of this. They will often do an excursion to Canberra rather than jump on bus to come into the city. Not saying that that's a bad thing, and I'm not wanting to take away from Canberra, but there's an awareness piece, and for us at New South Wales Parliament, it's really about getting that messaging out to wider New South Wales, and even those that are right on our doorstep, that we're here and that we offer a unique sort of learning experience. But going back to your question, our numbers have actually increased, but I couldn't necessarily correlate that between trying to make up for a decline in levels of civics engagement. A lot of it is around, having a strong curriculum linked offer, reducing those barriers to entry, down to administration of excursions and the communication and connecting with teachers in the right way.
Thanks.
I've got a fairly quick answer because the tours is not my area. We've had a stable, if not increased, number of people engaging in face-to-face, a decrease in online incursions. But we're trialling this year a different way of schools booking. We used to open bookings in January, and we'd have the same schools every year knew that who'd book out. So this year we're doing a drip feed opening of our booking system. So we may get different numbers this year just because of that different logistics that we've put in place.
I'll jump in. I actually left a comment in the Q&A section, but we've had a massive increase in South Australia, and I'm wondering if it is like a budget and complexity thing, and that they're choosing to come and visit Parliament in South Australia as opposed to travelling over to Canberra because it's a bit cheaper for the schools to try and do things locally. Some of the schools, even with the PACER rebates that are, actually PACER includes rebate as the R, so I don't need to say PACER rebates, but with PACER, they still might not have sufficient funds. So we've seen a huge increase of people coming to see us going, we couldn't afford to go to Canberra this year. I also have noticed that teachers have some struggles with planning excursions just generally because the risk assessment materials are becoming so complex, and that they're so time poor that doing all the risk assessment work to come on an excursion is going in the too hard basket, and they're not coming at all. So that's sort of my take on the state of excursions right now.
Yeah, interesting. I think it's also, I don't know about the room, but I've found there's been much more comments in our booking forms and things about people wanting like localized knowledge, and I wonder if as well there's a wanting to teach civics from a perspective that's closer to where the students live, where you understand the context that they're in, as opposed to going, yeah, but we can learn about federal parliament, we don't need to go to Canberra where you'll be in a new place already, and it'll be harder to understand the complexities of the conversation. I don't know.
I think it's a really good point. I think about our secondary schools leadership program. The power of that program is inviting the 2 representatives from a school in the electorate, combining them with a member and bringing disparate electorates together on one day, and we run them over 6 days. And what is powerful in those settings is you get a young person who is in the community speaking with a member who and just the level of kind of connection, it's hyper local, like you're saying, and it's very powerful, and it's almost like a sounding board for those members to better understand what's going on in the community because they're hearing it firsthand. So I would agree with that.
Perhaps while we're with you, Janson, we just had a question about some additional information regarding the travel subsidy program for students, but I might just connect you in with them after the chat, and you could send through information regarding that they can pass on if that works out.
Gladly. And our colleagues along Macquarie Street, so Museums of History and State Library, have been instrumental in informing that, plus many members on this call from other parliaments. So yeah, happy to.
Great. So we might skip up then to Sally's asked, I'd love to hear more about how the different speakers today reach and connect with teachers, and any insights, successful ways that you do this.
This is my current obsession. So may I touch on this, and I'll try and do it really quickly to give Narelle and Janson some time too. Finding teachers is so difficult because their inboxes are so full. The Department for Education, if you connect with them, can be really cagey about giving out their details, and for good reason. So I've been getting quite creative by joining teacher groups on Facebook and networking with teachers within those Facebook communities, and I make it super authentic. So I don't just go in to advertise or promote. It's like having meaningful conversations with them. So when people say, oh, does someone have a resource on this? I will take the time and I will help them, and then I build up the network that way. I also have been including in every goodie bag, like a little how can I help you card that goes to all of the teachers, and they can scan the QR code, and then it puts them on our mailing list, but also takes them to a survey where they can tell me what they want. So I'm collecting a lot of teachers that way. And then obviously you've got your usual methods like email databases, subscribing to an e-news up after their visit. But the newest thing that I've tried is making my own community on Facebook for civics educators. So that way we can have like a cluster of us together to ask questions, and I get every pre-service teacher in South Australia to connect to that group when they come and do a program with me. So I've been building up my network that way. I am very keen to hear from Narelle and Janson, because this is my pet project at the moment, like finding more teachers. So that's how I've been doing it in SA.
Just before we move on to Narelle and Janson, Natalie, I'm really interested in your civics page, because we'll often put out resources and share it. MOAD's got a great page that's sort of a civic education network that we've shared a lot of stuff on, and we've gotten a lot of stuff on, and I think we actually got a lot of people come and visit us in this PD today from that particular page. So if you're happy for interstate people to connect with your page and share resources for teachers and whatnot, we'd maybe just pop it in the chat or something, or what is it, and we'll find you and connect.
I'll pop it in the chat right now.
Thanks, Natalie.
In Victoria, we do a lot of collaborations with a number of different organisations. So we work with the Victorian Law Foundation, as well as two teacher associations, the Victorian Commercial Teachers Association and Social Education Victoria. So we often do, and also the Victorian Electoral Commission. So we often do cross promotion, because we know we'll pick up different teachers. There'll be teachers who get repeated messages, but also new eyeballs on those promotions. We also look at, we have an education advisory panel, which is a group of teachers and academics, and especially a couple of them are very well connected in the teacher spaces in networks that we're not allowed to in Parliament of Victoria have our own civics page because of the processes in social media and things like that we've got. So we often ask, I wrote to Miguel yesterday and said, oh, could you promote this in amongst any of the pages that you're on and things like that. We have our newsletter, and we also do a lot of pre-service teacher engagement, both at the university and at Parliament House, figuring that for every pre-service teacher we engage with, hopefully they will then go into a school and spread the word there. But one of our core ways to engage, and I'm going to do a shameless plug for anyone who's in Victoria or anyone actually across Australia who wants to travel to Victoria for this, we do a teacher open house a couple of times a year, and we throw the doors open to Parliament House. We put on refreshments, which is code for wine and cheese. We put out all our education resources. Mara and myself will be there, as well as core parliamentary staff. We have people in both chambers and the library, and teachers are allowed to wander the space, partly so we get to connect with them, but also partly we recognise that teachers often don't get to come to Parliament without 25 children in tow, and it's really nice for them to explore the spaces, think about how they might engage with either our resources or our tours, but ask those burning questions that they've got that they just don't have time to ask on tours as well. And the staff, it's a fan favourite of the staff that help us out on that. They say it's a really full-on 2 hours with all the questions that they get, but a really enjoyable couple of hours.
That's amazing, Narelle. As you were chatting, I was Googling and dropping links in for people so that I'd remember them for myself. But we'll try and make this chat obviously available to people to get all of those links that we've been dropping in as you've been chatting. So that's on the 10th of April, that open house. So
Yeah,
not far off.
No,
Great.
coming soon.
Yeah, thanks, Narelle. And very similar sort of approaches. I love how dedicated and focused you are, Natalie. It is a tough crowd, like in terms of, but worth the energy. I liked how that idea of like, if you connect with one teacher, you're getting that 30 students, like that ripple effect. I think that's a really important and powerful approach. Yeah, we engage the professional teaching associations, in particular Legal Studies Association of New South Wales and the History Teachers Association. Like I was saying, in my team, we have a media and communications team, which is great. And to Natalie's point, that authentic voice is really important, and conversations that are sustained is really important. And recognizing what mode of communication is best for what teacher group is really key. In some areas, like LinkedIn is really effective for us for really ongoing conversations, promotion, but then switching to Facebook and other channels for possibly more authentic conversations. We do a lot of journal articles, presenting at some of those. So the Legal Studies had a conference last week that Cam and the team presented at, and really connecting around content knowledge and how to support teachers specifically. We've introduced a teacher advisory group, which we pay teachers to participate in, which has been the first time that's been run at Parliament, and we're running that throughout this year. It's on a 2-year term, and a key part of that is ensuring solid diversity and representation across the state between primary, secondary and tertiary, and ranging from PhDs through to veteran class teachers to emerging new start teachers, I think has been really important, because we want to hear those different accounts and experiences. So we're working with them, and to be fair, I'm using them as a bit of a sounding board internally, but also for when I'm needing to advocate for teachers, and Parliament's a complex place. I'll often sub that group in to say, don't listen to me, listen to these 6 esteemed teacher advisors who feel this particular way on a matter. So I think that's a really sort of strategic and important way to do that. And then similar to Narelle, is just teacher previews is key, and trying to do them in partnership with other institutions, because we recognise that the value for some schools is about getting as much of the curriculum links and outcomes signed off on one particular visit. So where we can partner with natural institutions where we have those joint programs is another key way of connecting with teachers in that way.
I did forget to mention, and Andrew's comment prompted me about how many parliamentarians are previously teachers. We have quite a number in Victoria. I can't tell you off the top of my head, but it's at least 5. We've started a promotional program with of our resources with MPs, because they're often invited to go out to schools. Sometimes they feel a bit awkward. They're talking about their job, that's fine, but they want something to be able to leave the school with the school and things like that. So we've now got, we know it's not taken up by every member, but we've got a range of members who are going out and providing schools and teachers with our resources and ways to connect with us as well. So whether they're aware or not, they're doing some advocacy work on our behalf to connect with education.
I'm so sorry, you prompted me again, because I've totally forgot to say that we have an amazing collection of cultural institutions in the precinct around Parliament House, and both Janson and Narelle mentioned those partnership arrangements, and we've had such wonderful experiences doing collaborative programs with related or even completely unrelated institutions. So I'm part of a series called Step Outside the Classroom, which we've done for the past few years, where our Botanic Gardens, our zoo, our History Trust, the Festival Centre, and one of my colleagues who I believe is online right now, from the Art Gallery of South Australia, we run a 9-week series, and that means we all cross-promote each other. And so through that cross-promotion, I have had science teachers coming to see me that I would have never seen before, and that helped really build our network.
Thanks, everyone. And I think I was just wondering, with that with talking about reaching teachers, if we can revisit to both Narelle and Natalie touched on as well the importance of teacher education programs to reach a wider group of students. I've got sort of two questions on that. One, how do you go about measuring engagement on that or student impact? Like, have you put in systems in place where the teachers can respond after a period of time with how many students they've reached? And the second point that I sort of wanted to touch on is we're seeing unprecedented numbers of teachers leaving the workforce. Is this having an impact on how you think about these teacher education programs when a big portion of them, you said you were connecting with university graduates, well, most of them are leaving within 5 years. So what impact is that having on the longevity of those programs? Perhaps Narelle?
Yeah, the first point, sorry, which has just escaped my brain, that you asked around the
how you measure engagement of
engagement. Thank you.
With student engagement.
Yeah, that is really tricky. We do send out surveys and things like that, but as Natalie spoke to, oh no, that was a different meeting. Natalie was speaking about that getting teachers' responses to that is really hard. So one of the things that we do is we work with a range of different schools over the course of the year to trial our resources and see them ourselves in action and do an evaluation process through that, so we can work out what additional material might need to be there, or how students are physically using the resources we might give them and their points of understanding. In terms of teachers leaving, it is one of the things that we think about, that we're never going to be set and done, that we need to continue to build our teacher networks and our resources and promote and work with those teachers, because working with those pre-service teachers, they report, even though they're doing civics and citizenship at university, that the University of Melbourne, the tutorial that we're teaching there in a couple of weeks is 2 hours out of their whole teacher degree. So we know that they're going into the classroom with a fair bit of angst as well around teaching these things. So we need to continue to engage.
Perfect, thanks. And we're running out of time. Natalie's put her response to what she does, which is pretty hardcore, in the chat. So everyone have a look and a giggle there. I'm going to pass it back to Brianne to wrap up this session so we can all finish at 5. If anyone wants to, of the speakers, do you have just a go-to method when curriculum is released? Like, what is the first thing that you do? What's your go-to? Any hot tips? Given we've just had a new curriculum released in all of these states that all has to be implemented within the next couple of years, how are you feeling?
I was part of the working party that worked on the new Civics and Citizenship curriculum for Victoria. So my go-to was to see if my advocating for state parliament, not parliament or national parliament or federal parliament, got in onto the curriculum. So that was my go-to to see where we were actually positioned.
Fantastic.
I was also on the working group for the development of the South Australian curriculum, civics and citizenship area. So I kind of knew what would be coming. And I guess my first point of call will be looking at all of our existing materials, so that way I don't have to reinvent the wheel and figure out how I can incrementally adapt them to make sure that they're compliant. And then, similar to what Janson and Narelle has both said, I'll commence a gap research exercise. So let's fix all the stuff we've already got, so we've got things to continue with, and then I'm going to find all of the ways to fill the curriculum gaps that we haven't addressed yet.
Yeah, I'm the same. I mean, that Shazam analogy is a great one for us, because we've got this solid bedrock of programming. What are the opportunities? And I think for the team and for the wider parliament, it's been quite nimble around what needs to change and what's the change management that needs to come with this, because there's a long lead time, but we need to get it right in that forward planning, because it does impact, like at Parliament, in terms of the current offer, it will make a change to what we're doing, because a lot of the program might specify, like might focus on the built environment, whereas the question that's being asked is around civics and citizenship, and it's less about the built environment, about how laws are kind of being made. So that's the big change up for us.
Let's all realise it's not really that long a lead-in time, because we all know that it takes at least a year to develop a new program and then a year to promote the new program to book the following year. So the curriculum gets released, you've got 2 years to implement. You need to hit the ground running immediately if you're going to get students booked into an appropriate program when the curriculum is implemented. But yeah, I'll hand it back to Brienne, because we're right on 5.
Lovely. Thank you, Hermione. I would just like to thank our speakers, Narelle, Natalie and Janson. Thank you so much for giving us your time this afternoon and such amazing insights from all of you. I've taken copious notes, and as Sarah and Hermione said, we will try and get the links out to everyone as well. Also, just want to thank the rest of the committee members, Erin, Sarah, and especially Hermione for moderating the session today. 2 things before I let you all head off for this afternoon. If you are having any issues with your AMaGA membership, please feel free to email us directly. Our email address is education@amaga.org.au. Feel free to drop us a line. There's also a contact form on our website, particularly if you're having issues with your Education Network membership. Just send us through an email at education@amaga.org.au. And also next time we are going to be looking at another curriculum conversation, but next time we will be talking about art. So we will see you all for the next one sometime in term 2. But thank you all for joining us this afternoon.